And I'm just going, if you could mute your mics if you're not speaking. And I'm just doing a quick check that we are live on the YouTube channel. And it, okay, sounds good. We are live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We have an exciting episode planned for you all. Today, we are doing the Red Nation Podcast Year in Review 2023. This year was a significant year for us. I feel like we entered a new territory with the Red Nation Podcast and how we produce our content and how we're covering it. I feel in this political moment, we're really contributing to how we are seeing things happening in Palestine and how we're also covering indigenous issues here in Turtle Island. So I want to thank you all for showing up to our live stream and supporting the show. I just want to start by introducing everyone who's here. I'll go first and then I'll pass it to Melanie. Hello, everyone. Ubiakindi Sengiku. My name is Justine Tiba. I am from the pueblos of Santa Clara, Tesuki, and Acoma. Right now, I'm calling in from Lakota, Dakota territories, and I am happy to be here.
Cool. Thanks, Justine. Yate, everyone. This is Melanie Yazzie, co-host of Red Power Hour. Have had a spotty record with Red Power Hour this fall, but that's mostly just because the demands of organizing have been so great over the last couple of months. Going out on the streets and engaging in coalition work has taken precedence, actually, over podcast recording. But thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to be here with comrades. We don't get to share space like this very often together, believe it or not. So yeah, and I'm calling in from Minnesota Makoche, and I'll pass it on to Kylie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Kylie. I'm Danae, and I am calling in from Mesa, Arizona. And I'll pass it to Jen.
Jen, you need to unmute your mic.
Wow. Thanks for catching that, Nick.
I was like, does other people hear her? Am I just the only one?
No. Well, good to see you, everyone. Yep, I'm Jem Gnarly, co-host of the Red Nation Podcast. And I was just saying, talk about a shoddy record. I've been pretty MIA in all senses of it. Social media on here, but I hope to get going more, especially in the new year. I'm hoping things are going to clear up for me a little bit, but yeah, good to be here. Love Year in Review, reminiscent of our year in review party that we used to have amongst ourselves. Now we get to share it with you all. So, all right.
I guess I'll go next. Hamatakapi, this is Nick Estes. I'm here in Minneapolis and Minnesota Mokoche. Yeah, this is I'm co-host of Red Nation Podcast, but also I wanted to point out, since it hasn't been mentioned, this is also our 4-year birthday episode as well, because we were founded in 2019 on Indigenous Peoples Day, which was 4 years ago. Indigenous Peoples Day like alternates every year. It's like the first Monday or the second Monday of every October or something like that, which is formerly Columbus Day or whatever. And we published our first episode, which was on wild rice or Monoman, as they call it up here in Anishinaabe territory in the Great Lakes. So that was pretty cool. We also did, I think our first interview was with Vijay Prashad, which was recorded live in, not live, but it was recorded in person in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I used to actually just walk around with a Zoom recorder and just record people. And over the course of 4 years, we now use this online recording technology, which wasn't actually how we started. So it's kind of interesting how we're here. I think this is like a COVID artifact, but I'll turn it over to Kai. Kai, you're muted. Yeah, you're still muted.
You are still muted. Oh no,
Uh-oh.
we lost Kai.
Apologies, everyone listening. Kyan is obviously in the lobby of the Radisson, and I think their Wi-Fi might be a little shoddy. Please
So-
bear with us.
Somebody might be
How-
playing that grand piano a little too loud.
How about now? Am I good?
Yes, we got you.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It keeps going back to like muting itself. Yeah, I'm not in the best hotel right now, but thanks for introducing me, Nick. My name's Kyan. I'm usually behind the screen, but tonight I'm here in front with everyone. So I'll be adding a little bit of that behind the scenes perspective. So
He actually
be
lives in
here.
he lives in a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, if you can't tell
Yeah,
by
it's
his background.
it's just
For
my
those that-
hobby.
Oh, now you are muted too, Justine.
Yeah.
Oh, darn. Okay.
No, it's okay. We're warming up. We'll get there, everyone. Sorry.
It's all right. We'll fix it in post. No, I was muted. That's so funny. Not to be that astro girly, but this is the Mercury retrograde pre-shadow period, so it makes sense.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I know. Anyway. Oh, I'm so sorry, Kylie. You didn't get a chance to introduce yourself? I was just going on. My bad.
I did. I
Oh, you did?
It's
Oh.
Kylie's new glasses. She looks totally different, and so that's why you you thought it was a different person.
Anti Kylie is in the house.
I didn't recognize her when I got on. I was like, oh,
But cool. So this is actually pretty much like the Red Nation podcast team. We're missing Elena, we're missing Uahikea, and Sina is in the room but off of the screen as a producer. And these are the folks in Red Media who are producing the Red Nation podcast. So thank y'all for coming and hanging out with us. Like Nick was saying, this is not only our year in review episode, but also our birthday episode. We're 4 years old. Our first episodes were published on SoundCloud, and I was looking through it, looking at the memories of it all. This is when Nick was walking around with a Zoom recorder, and I'm just really happy to see where we come today. Like I said, this is published by Red Media. We are a press and media project by and for Indigenous people. The Red Nation podcast isn't our only podcast. We also have a Kuskala podcast, Red Surgeons. We also did work with the El Sheti Shankoin Writers Society, and we haven't done much of that this year, but in the past we have done a podcast with them. And am I missing any of our podcasts?
We have a collaboration with the Little Earth podcast, which should be publishing its first episode, I think, in a couple weeks. It kind of got pushed back with everything that was the intensification of the genocide in Palestine. Kind of pushed back a lot of things, but that'll be coming out hopefully sometime soon. And that's a really wonderful episode.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Yeah. And yeah, so the purpose of me introducing Red Media and sort of trying to demonstrate like our umbrella of work is because first on the agenda we're going to be talking about Freedom to Read book program that is sort of happening in the background of Red Media. So Kylie, would you like to bring that to center stage?
Sure. Thank you so much, Justine. Okay, so I forgot to say in my introduction that I'm the program director of Red Media, and I also run the Freedom to Read program. So Freedom to Read is Red Media's free book program. We distribute books to Native and non-Native communities that may otherwise be inaccessible. And so by supplying free books to both Native and non-Native communities, we hope to promote Native history, politics, creativity, and intelligence while combating erasure and romanticization of Indigenous people. Although we do give priority to Native communities just to ensure that they have access to the stories that they want to read. And so many of our book titles include works written by Native authors and authors from oppressed communities. And with that, we just believe that braiding Native struggle with global movements and liberation efforts is essential to our liberation under US occupation. So, and Freedom to Read, it operates entirely on book and monetary donations. And let's see, this year, or I guess before this, I was sort of going over all of the donations that we have received so far. And it's been so amazing to see the support we've gotten in just the short amount of time we've been operating. And we've been able to distribute a little over 1,300 books with various titles to various places. So we've distributed books to Navajo Nation Library, Santa Clara Library, also just community centers and organizations that provide resources for Native people. So Inda Young in Minneapolis, and Battered Families and Gallup. And then just various schools. We've donated to NACA in New Mexico. And so we've been able to do all of that with everyone's support. And so just want to continue to invite people to support Native communities through Freedom to Read. And we also have a collaboration with Massive Bookshop. And we also set up a book wish list on their website, which you can visit at massivebookshop.com. We recently updated our book wish list to include titles about Palestine and include Palestinian authors in our collection for distribution. And we have a PayPal that's also set up through Red Media's website, redmedia.press. So I hope people can continue to support us so we can get out these stories that people should hear and know about, and keep talking about Palestine.
Thank you, Kylie. Thank you. And this is just one of the many things that Red Media is doing with our work. The Red Nation podcast is only one of the branches of Red Media. So please support us as we move forward in our work. And actually, I'm going to move to Kai to talk a little bit about what he does for Red Media and for the Red Nation podcast, and what kind of thoughts he has about this year.
Hey, thanks for that, Justine. Thanks for that, Kylie, for the Freedom to Read program. I always thought that was a pretty cool program when you started it and started to build upon it. I also forgot in my introduction to talk about I'm the editor/producer for Red Media. I kind of handle doing the clips, a little bit promotion, things of that nature. So I think from my perspective of the growth of the podcast of Red Media, I usually sit through the episodes, I listen to them, trying to find some good content to share with you folks. But I think something I wanted to highlight for this year in review is just, I wanted to say, I think an area that we really grew was, how can I say this? Our in the field type of reporting has really improved, in my opinion. And it's always kind of fun to, when Justine or Nick or Melanie, when they're ever out in the field and they get some good media, they record media or they gather media, I always love to see it because it's it gives me the opportunity to highlight the work in a different way. I do love sitting and listening to the interviews, but when I'm able to get those type of clips, the footage, the audio, it's always fun trying to make it creative, trying to get it out there. So I think that's what I wanted to highlight specifically. You know, we kind of really becoming like a legit field reporting, kind of bringing you the breaking news, getting out in there. So that's always kind of fun. And I think, of course, that's always thanks to the support we get from everyone like that becomes a Patreon member, they do donations, or even just listening to the podcast, you know. But I think with that, I would say I hope more people subscribe to our Patreon, just because, you know, the more and more we get out there, I think we're going to need better cameras, better audio recording equipment. Right now, we got a few things, but I think if we keep growing like we are, we're definitely going to be in need of some better equipment. So please donate, please subscribe, you know. Plus, the more subscriptions we have, the more support we have, we can bring you like even more content, you know, documentaries. We can probably bring you some more like short form, like fun things. So that's all. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good segue into the next section, Kai. But before I give like this fundraising pitch, I just want to talk a little bit about Red Media and the Red Nation podcast. Red Nation podcast, as Justine pointed out, started off with a Zoom recorder. I think I actually gave that Zoom recorder to Jennifer, who's on the call, Jen Marley. But I've had that Zoom recorder for actually over like 10 years. It's like I can't remember what it is, an H1N1 Zoom or something like that, or maybe that's a virus. I can't remember. But anyways, I used to just go to academic conferences, or I would be traveling and I would just sit down with people. We did one on Lakota Foods with the Iron Clouds, which I thought was also really cool. We didn't do like a video, which would have been cool to see how they process like Lakota Foods and things like that. And then over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to switch to online streaming platforms, which it's a little bit different, but it also kind of changed how we do things in terms of like we have to set up interviews with people and invite people onto the show. But the kind of idea behind all of this was to create a platform formed by Indigenous people, and not just like we're going to just do sewing or I don't know, cultural things or things like that, or painting, but actually politicizing this in the sense that we understand that Native literature, Native writers, Native producers, Native content creators are not only underrepresented within sort of the broader sort of mainstream society and media landscape, but our perspectives on politics specifically are vastly underrepresented. If we are represented at all, it's typically just through cheesy flute music or dream catchers or various breaking the Red Nation podcast was the best idea ever. That's hilarious. So it was a big ambition for a small project initially. And of course, over time, we've gained some, professionalization. Cena came on board. It helped us sort of up our game. Kyan and others, Justine, Kylie came on board and helped us like really produce quality professional content. We still are out in the field in many ways, but the idea behind this is also that like Native perspectives are like our politics are often confined to sort of this realm of the nation that colonizes us, or the nation state that colonizes us. So our aspirations sort of get domesticated or contained within what is the United States. And you also see this happening in states like Canada, where the Canadian state funds a lot of media projects, especially like Native media projects, but it's pretty self-contained within the realm of the nation state. And we think that's not a really productive way of doing politics, or even imagining what indigeneity can or should be, specifically like thinking about the geopolitics of imperialism and the geopolitics of resource extraction or the fossil fuel economy. And over the course of 4 years, me personally have learned so much, and my analysis and understanding of issues has become sharpened because of the multitude of indigenous perspectives, ranging anywhere from the Pacific or to, you know, the subcontinent of India. We had an amazing podcast episode with Adivasi, or indigenous scholars and activists within India, giving a long perspective of, you know, not just British colonialism, but the current sort of conflicts that they have with the state, the post-colonial state of India. So this is, you know, this is really put a lot of things into perspective, and even being able to put out content immediately, you know, at the beginning of, you know, the Israelis, excuse me, the Zionist-led genocide against Palestinians in the, you know, in the month of October. We were you know, fortunate enough to have politics, but also comrades and relatives within the Palestinian movement to really step up and help, you know, shape our understanding as Indigenous people, not just in that moment, because we know that, you know, settler colonialism didn't begin on October 7th, right? And also the resistance to it didn't begin on October 7th. So that was incredibly important to contextualize it, because a lot of people, you know, when I'm out in the world, I call them Patreons in the wild. When I'm out in the world, random people will come up. They're not random, but listeners of the show will come up and be like, "Hey, I listened to the podcast." So I now carry around with me a bunch of stickers in my pockets. Sometimes I wash them in my jeans, and they stick to my jeans, they stick to my coats, because I think it's really amazing to see people, you know, out in the wild, out in the real world, and to hear their stories about why they listen to the podcast. I have a Palestinian colleague, comrade of mine, like, wrote me several you know, personal notes over email, talking about how the podcast really was a way to process not only what's happening in Palestine right now, but how to think about it in her position as somebody who, a Palestinian who lives in the United States, right? And is looking for decolonial, anti-colonial future in relation to the indigenous peoples of this land. So that was really powerful, you know, for me. And I really appreciate when people do write these things. I try to read them. When you write messages to us in the Patreon or to our email accounts, we do try to read them, because it is important. You know, this is a community that we're building, and it sounds so cheesy, and I really hate like entrepreneurial talk. I think it's total bullshit, garbage. I think the worst thing that I ever want to be, never call me an innovator. Like, if I do that, just like line me up against the wall, because that's just capitalist bullshit. Like, we're actually trying to create a political project, right, where we're in relation and in conversation with people all over the world, and thinking about that the struggle of American Indian, indigenous people in the context of North America isn't just some sort of isolated parochial sort of vision of justice, or vision of history, or vision of politics, but it's connected to this broader sort of network. And that's not, I don't think that's, you know, innovative. That's just really building on this long tradition of, you know, indigenous resistance that we've had over the years. But all of this sounds maybe really cool, and it sounds like I'm just like tooting my own horn over here, but all of this is only possible because we have Patreon subscribers. This is a key element, not just of the Red Nation podcast, but of Red Media itself. We do community outreach beyond just a podcast. So, for example, for the last, you know, for the month, the part of the month of September and into October, I was going to the Little Earth United Tribes, which is the only Section 8 housing, urban Native housing unit in the United States, and working with Native youth to develop a podcast, or ideas for podcast episodes. And some of them, you know, it was a lot of experimentation. Some of them came out to be really wonderful oral history podcast episodes. Others were just sort of for fun. Like, so for example, they wanted to do a scary stories episode. My dad happened to be in town, and he told scary stories on the podcast, and, you know, it was just really funny. We had debates about who was, you know, Freddy versus Jason versus Michael Myers. You know, like, it was just fun, you know, fun conversations. But then we did, I shouldn't say we, because I didn't do this. The Little Earth podcasters did oral history with Little Earth elders and, you know, community activists, and just discussing the way that Little Earth, was a product of the Red Power movement and was a product of struggle. And it helped these young people see in themselves, like, oh, we're a continuation of this, like, long line of resistance, just as an urban native community here in the city. And so I just want to point that out, that that connection is only possible because we have Patreon subscribers. So if you're listening to this podcast for free, awesome. There's a little known secret. YouTube, all of our content is free basically on YouTube. If it's recorded on video, it's going to be free on YouTube. Some of our audio content is put behind a paywall, but I think the vast majority of it is put out to the public eventually. But it's only possible to pay, people like Kai, we have Kiari, we have Justine, we have Sina, we have Kylie, who are all employees of Red Media. This is their bread and butter. I'm a volunteer in terms of, like, I do this out of, the love of the work and the love of our people. But I just want to put that out there. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, please consider doing it. We don't get like massive grants from like major foundations. We don't get, millions and millions of dollars. We don't even have an operating budget that even comes close to $1 million. We do this for the love of the movement. We'll do it even if we don't get paid, if we don't have this revenue stream, but it sure helps. It sure helps to give, to pay people what they're worth, in terms of the work that they put into. And so if you ever feel like, there's something that moved you about the podcast, please consider, donating. And if you teach us in your class, like, think of you have students buy books all the time, and they pay like these university presses, like, who just price gouge everyone, like $30 a book. And if you're teaching one of our podcasts in class, maybe consider, buying a subscription, just because it helps us. It goes a long ways. $2 goes a long ways. And even if you're just sharing it for free, that also goes a long ways, because the most important thing isn't just getting people to subscribe. The most important thing is actually changing this world, right? And I think with our recent interventions within the conversation around Palestine from an indigenous perspective, we can see the net result in terms of shifting the conversation within the indigenous, within Indian country and within indigenous communities. There was sort of a hesitancy at the beginning of, October to really weigh in, right? And we have to cut through the propaganda. We have to cut through the racism. We have to cut through the constant targeting and defamation and degradation of indigenous people here in Turtle Island. But yet we have an important voice. We have an important perspective when it comes to the question of settler colonialism and decolonization. And this is our moment, to show up for Palestinian relatives and to make those connections clear, that there is a viable alternative, to this current nightmare that we're in. And that, that begins with, not just listening to a podcast, but that begins with going out into the streets, joining people and struggle, going to these things. And I think that's what we've been, all of us on this, as part of Red Media, as part of the Red Nation podcast and the Red Nation, that's what we've been doing. We really throw our heart into all this. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone who supported us over the last 4 years. We're going to have more content, more struggle. And I'm just excited to see what this podcast will look like in, 4 years from now.
Thank you so much, Nick. I'm wondering if any of our other podcast hosts have similar thoughts or want to expand on that. Jen or Melanie?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like when we first started, I couldn't have imagined that we'd grow to be this, although like we had really ambitious goals from the beginning too. And we're seeing a lot of them just like already come to fruition really quickly. Kai had mentioned the possibility of making things like documentaries pretty soon and things like that. And that is something that we talked about in the very beginning as like a long-term aspirational goal, but now it feels much closer. And I think producing content like that is just, it's so important right now in this particular moment. like Nick was saying, when Native people see a position put out and from an indigenous perspective on Palestine, it gives them permission to take a side, right, to stand with Palestine, because so many, unfortunately, Native people are either bought into Zionist propaganda, or they fear what might happen when you stand with Palestine, just as having presence, having a voice, having this media, gives people permission to resist in all types of ways, or just, educate themselves, or, feel more comfortable developing their politics. I think that's so important right now. I feel like I've said this a bunch of times on the podcast, but one thing I'll never forget is when I was in Venezuela, we were told that the biggest reason, the biggest driving factor behind the 2002 coup was media, was the way, you know, the people trying to initiate the coup really infiltrated their media sector. And so this project becomes the project of Red Media. It becomes like increasingly important by the day. And I'm really like, I really want to push back when people say that something like this isn't revolutionary or isn't assisting in the political work. Like, of course, it's not the end all be all. We know that. Of course, we know that this is just a part of it, but it's an ever increasingly important part of building a movement right now. And so, yeah, I just really hope that the podcast and Red Media continues to grow. I hope we grow to produce all different types of media. I'm really looking forward into exploring more visual media. I'm really looking forward to the possibility of getting things out to a broader audience. And especially when I'm thinking about like my own family, like I'm thinking about, what is something that they're going to not only want to consume but be proud of, right? As well as like what's going to be a very powerful educational tool. So yeah, I'm proud of us. I look forward to upcoming projects. I look forward to reaching these goals as we've been. And again, it's thanks to all of the patrons and all of the people who support this work. And just know that this work, it does go far beyond the podcast. We're helping put books in Native communities. We're helping to, continue with mutual aid efforts. We're doing the best we can as we're, in high demand, responding to the current political moment. And yeah, I also mentioned like the party. Sorry. We used to have like a year in review party. And it was really fun. We'd invite, like all the comrades and fellow travelers, and we like eat together and have like a little slideshow. But I really like that we're getting to do it in this format, just to open it up to you all, kind of get a taste of what we've been doing. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Jen. Melanie?
Heck yeah. So last night, the Red Nation held a teach-in and a panel in South Minneapolis, and it went well. And after everything wrapped up, a young Anishinaabe homie, he came up to me and he just introduced himself. He's like, "Oh, you're Melanie." And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "I recognize your voice because I listened to the podcast." And he's like, "It's just so cool to like match the voice, to finally meet the person, behind the voice." And folks, I've had many people, like Nick said, patrons in the wild, Native people. I've had a lot of Native people come up to me in various places I've gone to, recognizing my voice. And just, I think the reason why those encounters really touch my heart and my spirit is because I feel like the podcast, in a way, it enters into people's homes, I had another relative and a comrade say that sometimes he actually just plays the YouTube videos in the background when he's at home, because the YouTube videos of like me and Elena, for example, talking on Red Power Hour, because it helps him to feel like not so alone. And this was a Native comrade. And I think besides offering, right, the incredibly important political perspectives and engaging in the war of ideas and taking the ideological struggle, the ideological aspect of the political struggle for decolonization and liberation that we're engaged in seriously, I think the podcast also allows us to develop relationships, even in unlikely places and with people we don't even know, because it's like our voice. And I guess almost like this is the power of media, I guess, because I never really thought much about doing media, especially when I was becoming like an academic. And because academics and like the way you're trained in graduate school, you're actually media work, like podcasting, is considered lowbrow, right? It's not considered like real intellectual work. And in fact, political work in general is not really considered a high standard of intellectual engagement or theoretical engagement. And so something that I feel like the podcast has taught me is that making those connections with people far and wide and developing real relationships with them could only happen if it would never have happened, actually. I think at the scale that it has, had we not started the podcast and begun this project. And this relates to one other thing that I wanted to say about this year with the podcast. So Red Power Hour began in the fall of 2020 as like a series of the Red Nation podcast. And so we began about a year, just about a year. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong with this timeline in this chronology. So we've been doing this for 3 years, Red Power Hour. I've co-hosted Red Power Hour for 3 years. And I think it was maybe this spring or it was last spring, Elena and I, it was around the time of MMIW Day, which I think is May 5th of every year. And we didn't really have a strong plan or an agenda for that episode. And so we're like, okay, well, we need to record. We have things to say. But we're just going to like wing it a little bit on Red Power Hour. And I think in the middle of the conversation, the live conversation, as we were recording that episode, we dubbed it like Native Woman Freestyle Hour. And so the series is called Red Power Hour, but like the vibe, I think a lot of times on Red Power Hour is the Native Woman Freestyle. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I think this relates to like developing relationships with people and making new relatives that you maybe wouldn't be able to otherwise had we not had the podcast. That, the podcast is actually for me as a Native woman, for me as an academically trained intellectual, it has been such a lifesaver for me to be able to sit on the mic with other like down ass Native comrades, especially women. Twice every other week I get to do this and to just speak my mind freely, unapologetically, and without being mediated. And what we do on the podcast that is also really important is that no one tells us what to say. We don't have to write a grant and be beholden to the people who fund us, who might limit or censor what we can say. There's no like peer review process that some sort of like academic institution or some academic publisher gets to throw at us to tell us that what we're doing, doesn't meet their standard. We create our own standard. And I think it's a very high standard actually in Red Media and with the podcast. And I feel like this is why Native listeners of the podcast come up to me, because the space and like the relationship that's created through the podcasts as we like speak, we speak at you and we show up on YouTube. If you watch the YouTube videos every week, it is a space that's like just purely Native, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. And there's just no bullshit. There's no pandering to anything and anyone. We can just be like unapologetically ourselves as Native leftists, as Native feminists, as Native women, with all of the humor and the imperfection, but also, like the refusal to, again, just to pander to the settler quibbles, either within kind of intellectual or media or journalism work, or even in like the field of political struggle. And from what I can tell, first of all, that means a lot to me. That means a great deal to me, to be able to have the opportunity to do this. I really look forward to it, even when I'm really tired. And I think that this is probably why a lot of our native listeners really appreciate it and look forward to it, because it just allows you. It's like you just get to have just like a down ass conversation amongst native people, which rarely happens, especially in public. And by creating the podcast, we essentially created a whole public of like unmediated native discussions, and unapologetic native discussions. And like, where do you get that? Like, especially from a leftist perspective, where do you get that? You don't get that anywhere, because as Nick said, like, native people are hyper marginalized. And honestly, living in Minnesota has really helped me to understand how little respect people have for native people. And like, people don't listen to native people. And I think a lot of the time, like, people, and I mean even other leftists, non-native leftists, they don't listen, they don't respect native people. And they certainly don't like see us as leaders, you know? There's a lot of lip service to it, but I don't really see it in action. And so yeah, we're just not taken seriously. And so the Red Nation podcast, the Red Power Hour, yeah, we're silly. Like, you know, it is like Native Women Freestyle. Sometimes we make mistakes and it's a little loopy. I'm not going to lie. We're not perfect, but it does at least create a space where Native people, we take ourselves seriously. And I think our Native listeners really appreciate that. Because again, like, you don't really get to see yourself reflected in this way, in public, in a state of hyper normalization. Like, settler colonialism is like hyper normalized in the United States. And that's why I think the marginalization and erasure is so profound. And so it feels so totalizing sometimes. So yeah, I think I really understood that for the first time this year with the podcast versus the last 3 years I've been doing Red Power Hour. So thank you everyone for listening, but especially, like, when I record my podcasts, I talk to native people. That's my audience. I'm not talking to, you know, like a university press, and I'm not talking to other experts and things. I'm just kind of like, you know, talking to my own family, or the relatives I meet a lot on the streets. That's who I'm talking to. And that's the relationship that I am most interested in building through the podcast.
Thank you so much for that, Melanie. For this next portion, we're kind of going to move more into like a conversational type of deal for what we're going to talk about. But before we do that, I just thought I would go ahead and read a couple stats of our podcast. I don't remember if we mentioned it before, but right now we are at 3,200,764 all-time downloads for the podcast. So this year we hit 3 million views. And we have also done a lot of content since everything has popped off in Palestine. Since October 9th, we have published pretty much almost entirely Palestinian-centered episodes. With starting on October 9th, we published You Ain't a Leftist If You Haven't Left Yet with Muhammad Al-Kurd. We published A Nightmare and a Dream, Palestinians Rise Up with Ali Aboumina from Electric Intifada. We Didn't Start the Fire with Vincent Bevins. Red Power Hour, Palestine Roundtable. We Go Back in Time Only to Come Right Here, Right Now. Indigenous Solidarity of Palestine with Ua Hikea Maile and Leanne Leanne Simpson. I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce your other last name correctly. Free Palestine Freezes All with Red Power Hour, and Palestine Will Be Decolonized Part 1 and 2. And for our top 10 episodes, we have Starting at number 10, ex-FBI agent breaks down the silence on Leonard Peltier and COINTELPRO with Colleen Rowley. Number 9 is MK Ultra and the kidnapping of Native children with Mohawk mothers. Number 8 is the coup in Peru with Johanna. Number 7 is If I Were President with Cornel West. Number 6, What Oppenheimer Left Out with Beata and Tina Cordova. Number 5, Good Night, Pax Americana, Neoliberalism and the Decline of U.S. Empire. Number 4, Red Power Hour episode, Shit Ass White Liberals. Number 3, You Ain't a Leftist If You Haven't Left Yet with Muhammad Al-Kurd. Number 2, We Didn't Start the Fire with Vincent Bevins. And number 1 was A Nightmare and a Dream, Palestinians Rise Up with Ali Abumina with Electric Intifada.
I have a quick anecdote about that. The Ali Abunima episode. My several of my tribal council members listened to that episode.
Whoa, that's awesome!
And they were like, "Well, it really breaks it down, you know." And actually, when I talked to Ali, he said that he was reluctant to speak to a lot of different places, but he's always, ever since I've known him, he's always made it clear that there needs to be, you know, more work done connecting, you know, with indigenous movements and people here. So I just wanted to add to that little anecdote. Also, the Colleen Rowley thing, I completely forgot about that. There's been so much like wild stuff that's happened this year. Like if you asked me, I would have been like, oh yeah, we did that in 2022, not in 2023. So that's kind of a blast from the past.
No, for real. That was a Red Nation podcast exclusive. Like, I didn't even realize that until I looked at the list a few minutes ago.
The funniest thing that happened with that episode is that there was this ex-FBI agent. I can't remember his name. It's called a no parole Peltier or something like that. And he just he trolled that whole episode. He wrote like a post about it, and then he called into a talk show about it, as well as the Native America Calling show. And he was just so like irate. It was hilarious. It was really funny because it just shows you like how like we've changed the conversation on, you know, certain things. And I think, you know, there was some other stuff that happened this year. I don't know if we want to talk about some of that, but where our work actually did change national conversation on certain questions. I think Palestine was a big one. It's had a huge impact. A lot of people reach out to me personally, but also in the comments on our podcast episodes saying that this is like really informational and helps them sort of navigate the world, you know, and as it is right now. But I don't know if anyone has any other like anecdotes from podcast episodes. Maybe Kai could talk about what goes viral on TikTok, because you're always like talking about that. I don't even know what's going on in TikTok.
I'll be honest, right? I do not know what goes on half the time with social media. I'm just like shooting in the dark, and some things work, some other things don't, you know. But I think I don't know, maybe what really works is what gets the people like heated, honestly. Sadly, you know, it's like social media. For one, I think the one thing that really put us on the map recently, it's not any of these episodes, unfortunately, but it was Melanie's speech from the march when we went to the National March in DC. Dang, that speech, Melanie, it got us kind of put us on the board again. I feel like we were waning a little bit, but I feel like it reestablished us in terms of like the podcast and getting our name out there again. It's like, I think right now it's like on TikTok, it's like 200 and maybe 30K views. Like, I don't know, and it's funny too. I guess this is an anecdote about that. I was going to with my cousin. She needed to get some stuff renewed for her. And we went to the Navajo Nation capital, and we're talking a little bit about what's going on in Palestine. She was asking questions about like the boycott of Starbucks and stuff. But she's like, yeah, I watched a video on TikTok about someone in DC. I was like, oh yeah. She showed it to me. I was like, oh yeah, that was the one I'm talking about. Like we were we were there. Like that's exactly who I was referring to, and because she was wondering why I went to DC and stuff like that. But for me, it was just pretty funny seeing, like, I had no like influence over her watching that, but just being out in the viral sphere, she like saw it, and I don't know, it was kind of like a little cool connection for me personally to see. So that's what I'll say about that.
I have sort of a critique. It's not really a critique, but it's like one thing I don't like when people come up to me in the wild and tell me like about the podcast is like, I haven't caught up yet. And it's like, what's there to catch up on? Like, this isn't homework. You're making me nervous because I haven't even listened to every, like I've listened to almost all of them, but I haven't like, it's not, this isn't homework. Don't treat it like that. That's weird. Just listen when you can. It's cool. Like, and it's okay to maybe just listen to one episode. But if you're a freak and you want to listen to all of them, that's cool. But don't like beat yourself up about it. Like, you don't have to disclose that to me.
Yeah, we're not monitoring.
Yeah, I'm not
I get that a lot too, and then
Yeah.
sometimes I won't even know what they're talking about, and I'm
Like
like,
guilt?
what?
There's like automatic guilt, and I'm like, it's fine.
yeah.
I don't. Yeah, that's silly. Out of the
Not-
loop.
Not related to the podcast, but related to the speech, the DC speech that's making the rounds on TikTok. 2 weeks ago, so my class this fall is in Monday afternoons. So I just like I walk in the door of my classroom, and like my students are losing their minds. They're like screaming, and they're like, I was like, am I late? I was like, am I late? Because I always try to arrive 10 minutes early. And then all of a sudden I hear, like on their phone, my own voice, the speech. And they had just seen, someone had shared with one of them on TikTok. And then of course they all shared it together, the speech from DC. And they were like, you told us you went to DC, but you didn't tell us you spoke. Like I had betrayed them. Anyway, it was like it was an interesting moment where, I had not mentioned it. I'm not out here trying to fangirl on myself. That's ridiculous. I don't do that ever. Certainly don't do that in the classroom. But my student who found it and then shared it with other people, it had been shared with them by like someone like really not even like in the movement or whatever. And they had just come upon it by like a third party. And then it just so happened that I'm the professor and they knew who I was. And so I think that's happening right now out in the TikTok sphere with that speech. But the speech is, again, the speech was written, I delivered it the best I possibly could, but that speech was written by all of us. And of course, again, my favorite line, one of my very favorite things I've ever been able to say in public, and certainly on a national stage in the heart of Empire, was the fort is breached and the wagons are burning. I want to say it again. I'm going to say it every week until the end of time. It was one of the greatest pleasures of my life to say that on a national stage in Washington, D.C.
Hell yeah. Honestly, what made it go viral is because that was the first video I posted after I rebranded the TikTok profile from Red Media to the Red Nation podcast. So it's actually like the clout and that of the Red Nation podcast that just made the page just totally take off. And that speech, people are like, Melanie Yazzie for Navajo Nation president. Oh, what was that comment I read to you yesterday? Oh, I can't even remember.
Oh, what was it?
It was so funny. Oh man. Oh, I can't even think of it. If I can think of it later, I might say it. But yeah, people are like losing their minds on it. I'm really happy, and it's literally just because people appreciate the podcast. I'm happy. I feel like we're reaching the youth this way. And yeah, and it's actually out of all the social media platforms I post for the Red Nation and the Red Nation podcast, TikTok has gotten with that speech like the most engagement out of like anything we posted this entire year. So hell yeah, that was really rad.
I thought it was pretty funny in that talking about TikTok again. In the search thing, like in the comments, it was like, "Who is Melanie Yazzie?" So I just thought that was pretty funny. People are all looking you up.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Sheesh, they're looking for you on TikTok, Mel. That's what that means. Like, if there's a video that talks about something, like the algorithm picks up if what people search after viewing that video. So that means people were trying to find you after watching that video. Wild.
Are you telling me I need to create a TikTok account?
Hmm.
No, you just need to be
Nah.
like shouting at hundreds of thousands of people all the time.
More speeches.
There's a lot of content of me saying a lot of those kinds of things on YouTube. You literally just have to look it up on YouTube. There's like an entire archive of me speaking that way on YouTube over the last like 15 years.
We'll get it on the platform.
You know what's
If,
gonna happen? I bet, like, you know that, like, what's her name? That woman who gives like gold digging advice, and she made YouTube videos in the early 2000s, but now they're going viral because people are recording them from YouTube and putting them on TikTok. So she's a TikTok star, even though these videos are like 20 years old. That's what's gonna happen to you, Mel. You're gonna be a TikTok sensation, even though your presence is only on YouTube mostly, because people are gonna upload those videos and make them into TikToks.
You know, that's kind of happening to Nick right now. You just found that edit of him.
There's so many Nick edits, y'all. There's so many Nick edits of like random lefty pages. You can tell it's like teenagers that use like crazy funk music and like filters. And it's like Nick speeches and like pictures of Nick and edits of Nick. And like, it's wild.
Where
I
did
didn't
these
even
things?
I didn't even understand when you sent it to me. I was like, I don't even know what this is. Guys. I
Nick,
don't
Nick,
like
on TikTok, when they post a photo gallery, you have to scroll.
I know I did,
Yeah,
but I was just like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Whatever. I'm
The
sorry,
kids
whoever.
love it.
I'm sorry, whoever created that. Thank you, but I don't. I'm not 100%. I don't really 100% understand it. I'm just being honest.
It's for the kids,
okay.
okay? The kids love it. It's for the kids
That's
to
cool.
think you're just an epic icon and be like, oh my God, I'm getting so yoded.
Nobody understood purple ketchup in the 2000s, but it was for the kids, you know? So
What?
that's kind of what TikTok is. See?
Grimace blood from McDonald's. Remember? Did anybody see that meme from the Macy's Day Parade?
Yes.
And, they did a ceasefire now like protest in the middle of it. Like Grimace's face is like,
Yeah.
he's like in front of the McDonald's float.
No, they were comparing him to John Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah, he was riding in the back of the convertible.
Oh God. Oh my God. What a masterpiece. Anyways, yeah, it's really funny to see how like people respond to us, not only the podcast, but even like our presence as individuals. People just take it and run with it. And there was a time when we had to make memes about ourselves. Gone are those days.
That's so sad. We didn't do that.
Sometimes people will bring up an old meme that I made and tag me in it, and it's like it's supposed to be anonymous, but okay. It could get me in trouble today, but whatever.
It can't tie you to it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, this is there's a lot to say about the podcast. I was thinking about like even the hyper normalization of like genocide and racism against Native people. And I think this is like the biggest teaching moment for people. It's like, yeah, you can literally broadcast 24/7 the genocide against Palestinians, and then you're like, why doesn't anybody get it? And it's because this country literally is founded on genocide and like eliminating Native people every single day. That's why it's possible. That's the only reason why it's possible, because morally the United States and the people who live here, I'm not like blaming everyday people, but they've been indoctrinated into accepting that as a fundamental reality.
Mhm.
So yeah, it is. it is a hyper normalization, of the Palestinian genocide. And so it's like you're not going to be able to speak to the conscience of a country that just accepts that as fact, for its existence. It's not to say that people can't be swayed or changed, but you have to understand, like, so you're going to just keep running into that wall, unless you take that wall down, and it's I think this is what the importance of media is to say that it doesn't matter, like, we have our rad friends who like to take direct action all the time, and that's really important. And but I think it's also about attacking those walls in our minds and destroying those things first and foremost, because you're never going to get free if you don't think freedom is possible in the first place. And so it's something that's like I've just learned in the last couple of months. And it's not that I ever had faith in, like, that, like, just kind of showing images of people's endless and continuous victimization and genocide is somehow going to move a country into humanity or into caring, but it's a clear demonstration of the sort of depths to which people have been indoctrinated into this particular system, where even in these kind of like highfalutin magazines and newspapers and even podcasts, people literally quibble over the nuances of genocide and what is acceptable in terms of, like, genocide. And it's like your grandchildren are going to look back on this moment and judge you for being a coward, like just like the children of white settlers who grew up today and are now becoming woke or whatever, and looking back on their genocidal ancestors and saying, what a freaking disappointment you are. History books will be written with your name and your face, because we will not forget that. Every time that somebody, like, tried to morally equivocate the sort of the genocide that's happening in Gaza to an act of resistance, a physical resistance, trying to morally equivocate a nuclear armed power going up against people who don't even have an air force or a navy, right? Like, that's like, you are insane. Like, that is an insane moral equivocation. And I think what the podcast has taught me, as somebody who's, like, still in the process of, like, I think of myself as pretty, like, decolonial, and then I get, like, hit over the face with, like, this culture stuff. It's like, you don't speak your language, blah 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 blah, this is not how our ancestors behaved. But then when you think about it, when push comes to shove, and, like, there's actual indigenous people who are resisting and, like, fighting for freedom, those same people are, like, nowhere to be found, like, in terms of, like, where are you at, bro? Like, I thought we were down. But then it also, like, it reframes that question of decolonization. It reframes that question of consciousness. That consciousness is actually, in my opinion, the first step that we should be taking as Native people when it comes to these questions. It's not about how many feathers you have in your hair, right? It's not about if you can speak your language. I think people should learn to speak their language, and that is an incredibly important aspect of it. But it's understanding the socioeconomic and material consequences of what we do and what we say and how we act in the world, that really are important at the end of the day, because I don't think our ancestors are looking kindly upon us right now in this moment in time when it comes to these larger questions. And I keep that in mind. But then I also think that there are a lot of Native people out there who are genuinely interested and genuinely do care about these things, and that genuinely want to learn. Also non-Native people too. And that I think they are mostly, the majority of people. They're just too afraid, or don't necessarily have the kind of things, the language or the skill set to talk about them or to move to action. And that's why it's important, to continue these projects, because we will always be here. Like, like, there's one thing that I learned about Native organizing, and it's like, you win not just by, like, showing up, you win by, like, sitting through a 3-hour long meeting because you're just, like, you just have way more patience than everybody else, right? And you're committed to the long term, right? anyways, I'm just like rambling now, but I feel like our project has not ended. Maybe one day there will be no need for the Red Nation podcast, but frankly, I don't see that happening in this moment in time. And like, I remember like growing up when we were, young kids, and like thinking about what our ancestors did in sacrifice, and people would always talk about, I want to live in the glory days of, like of Crazy Horse, of Tashunka Witko and Inkpaduta, our warrior societies. I want to live in the days where our people are free. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and like looking at the horror that exists. And it's like, I don't think I would rather be alive in any other time. I'm here for a reason. This project, the Red Nation, is here for a reason. We are here in this particular moment in time for a reason. I don't want to get like metaphysical or whatever, but I'm proud to live in this particular moment in time. And it is my obligation and duty to, be your your dedicated reporter, or your, that person in your ear talking, or on your, laptop when you're just playing YouTube in the background, and helping, push towards something that'll change. Because this is it. We're in a transition moment, in history. And I don't think I'd be alive. I'd rather be alive in any moment than now. Right. Anyways, like, I don't think that's ever going to make it into TikTok. I think people will just be like, what the heck? This guy's a boomer.
Well, you said something, wait, is my mic on? Yeah. You said something last night at the event, Nick, about, I wrote it down. Hold on a second. It was actually a really good quote about why people in the US struggle so much with kind of having an unequivocal stance on Palestine. And it's because of the way Native people are treated here. And I was thinking, when people talk about settler colonialism and the colonization of Palestine and Israeli settler colonialism, they use the language of normalization. But they don't really use that here to talk about US settler colonialism. And I think it is because also this is relates to something you said, Justine, on a podcast episode several weeks ago. The one like where we go back in time only to come to find ourselves here in this moment. That in fact is because partly because of like the longer stretch of time, the way that settler colonialism has existed for a longer period of time. I would say in Turtle Island, that we are in a state of hyper normalization of settler colonialism here, where it's people think it is so settled that it's just a fact, like you said, and that there's just like these gradations of genocide that then are just like administered and then also enshrined within like the everyday practices of US citizenship. And when we wrote Red Nation Rising about border towns, that part of the reason why we thought, the Red Nation came out of the struggle for liberation and reservation border towns. And what reservation border towns teach us is that yes, you can look at like the slow violence or like the gradations of genocide. And there's been a great deal of academic attention to this kind of aspect of colonial violence that Native people experience in Turtle Island. But there is still like an ongoing war against Native people, against Native land. There's an ongoing war to destroy and to defame Native nations. And border towns are those are sites in which that contestation and that war and that struggle is very alive, is hyper violent and very much happening. And I would say in some ways, like border towns are spaces that are not hyper normalized when it comes to settler colonialism in the US. Naming a street after, misspelling a street name, or like calling the state of Minnesota, right? Stealing Dakota language to name a state, a settler state called Minnesota. That is a type of hyper normalization that then people here, for example, mostly settler populations like internalize that. And then they just accept that that's fact and that like colonization is over and that Native people are conquered. But I think Indigenous resistance, but then also the work and the fact that the Red Nation has been born out of border town struggles shows us that, state violence against Native people, especially in a settler society, is still very much open war against Native people. This is why the violence, and this is how we explain why violence is so extreme in border towns. And so I guess what I'm saying is that there's no excuse in the United States, for people to pretend like colonialism is so hyper normalized that like we can't imagine a world without it, or that they filter their very understanding of what's happening in Palestine through this. It's like a slumber that everyone is like, oh, well, colonialism, well, it just happens, you know, or they don't see that it is still contested by Native people, or they willfully ignore that, especially here in Minnesota. This place is really intense that way. Liberalism is like worms in your brain in this place, much more so, I would say, than in the Southwest, where violence against Native people is like standard and very public and very open. And so they read Palestine through their own anti-Indianism. That's what she said. It is acceptable, or it is like common sense to hate Palestinians in the United States because it is also acceptable, and it is common sense to hate Native people in the United States. And so another comrade of ours who helped us put the event on last night, he said something. He had been reading Red Nation Rising. We had a conversation like earlier this fall, and this was right after October 7th. And he was like, you know, reading Red Nation Rising, he's like, the way you write about settler identity and settler ontology, and you really condemn, you like deconstruct it, you condemn it, and you indict settler ontology in Red Nation Rising. He's like, it's so instructive for how we understand, you know, the settler colonial project of Israeli nationalism as well, and what's happening in Palestine. And so I've just been like thinking about that all fall. I haven't had a chance to talk about it on the podcast. But I think not only do Native people, like you said, need to like denormalize settler colonialism. But I would say that like people in the US also need to denormalize settler colonialism in their minds. And one of the things we need to do is to like thoroughly dismantle settler ontology, period. Because that seems to be a lot of the problem. And it's not just like the right-wing militia, like hate crime, white supremacist people that you see in border towns a lot who really, really hate Native people. It's like liberals for sure, who have that. And somehow like, because of the way that liberalism work, it kind of hides things from you, or you like hide things from yourself. And you have to almost like discover like your racism, you know, because liberalism has taught you, you know, that it's like acceptable to act a certain way, or that like you can be nice, but then just in public, but then be racist behind closed doors. You get what I'm saying? And so there's also that's going on. And of course, like those of us who are in the United States, the more work that we do here, you know, the better off everyone around the world is going to be, because the US just preys on the entire world because of its imperial character. But yeah, I don't know what got me on that. Just thoughts I have in my brain.
Well, maybe we should talk about things that we like want to do. I know that Jen and I, before all this stuff happened, wanted to do a podcast or an episode or some episodes on like New Age spirituality, and like I watch Healing from I subscribe to Healing from Healing on Instagram. It cracks me up for a variety of reasons, but there's been this like new push to, it kind of gets to what you're talking about, Melanie. There's been this like new push to like decolonize like psychotherapy, or what do they call it? Gosh, I'm messing this up. Psychedelic therapy, like with mushrooms and everything, but the whole psychedelic industry is actually deeply colonial. It it stems from, you know, or you know, people going to like Mexico and, you know, exploiting indigenous communities who were using mushroom, psilocybin mushrooms as a sacrament. Encountered this in Bolivia with Vivi Camacho. She was she was like a vice minister of ancestral medicines there, and she explained to me her job at the time was to sort of implement regulations around ayahuasca use, because they call it narco tourism, where mostly like white tech bros, you know, go down to Bolivia or the Amazon, and they basically exploit these indigenous people, you know, to go on their like self-healing journeys. And now there's this whole industry that's being built up around psychedelic therapy and like trauma therapy.
Mhm.
And I'm not criticizing people who use it. I'm just talking about how this is being commodified and turned into a for-profit adventure, and like how these communities are actually you know, trying to protect an indigenous practice, you know, and now they're trying to patent. I was speaking with Dr. Jennifer Nez Dennett-Dale. There's certain pharmaceutical companies that are also trying to patent a synthetic version of mescaline, which is like peyote. And the reason why they're making a synthetic version of mescaline is because it's a decolonial framework. Therefore, they won't have to exploit the actual peyote button itself. They can just manufacture their own sort of synthetic version. But anyways, I could go on and on about this. I'm probably going to piss off a lot of our listeners. But I also think it's like how like even the search, like there's this constant search, you know, for the self, right? We call it searching for your belly button. Like, where's your umbilical cord buried? Do you actually belong to the land? You know, and I understand and sympathize with this like social, cultural, spiritual alienation that like settlers might have, because they're the most assimilated people here. Like they're totally assimilated. We're not. Like they always say like, oh, the forced assimilation project of the Native Americans. Nobody ever talks about like, well, how did whiteness come about and how did you guys buy into all that, you know? But the problem is that because even through their quote unquote healing process, or even through their own traumas or whatever it is, they still have to be parasitic and exploitive and colonial, right? They have to go and turn something that's a medicine and turn it into a drug. That's how we got cocaine, right? Coca is a medicine. Coca is a leaf that is used as a sacrament, right? So too is peyote. So too is all these other drugs. But now you're turning it into a drug, you know, and it's kind of indicative of the soullessness, I guess, in a metaphoric, but also in a real way of settler colonialism, that it can only try to fill that void through consumption, right? And I think that's, you know, I used to be sort of a critic of like this whole like consumer culture stuff, but I actually think that it has some value in understanding. It's like you cannot consume your way out of this problem. You cannot consume your way out of trauma, right? And the approaches to addiction, the approaches to, you know, trauma-informed care are very individualized and privatized in the sense that they're kind of confined to a certain space, and you know, an individual, between a therapist and a, you know, whatever, a patient, but also privatized in the sense that it's like private practice care, right? It's a for-profit industry. And what we see in like social movements, and what we see through our struggle and through, you know, indigenous practices of healing, it's actually collective. And there is no value in that in terms of a capitalist or consumer culture, right? But there is a value in terms of collective struggle and collective healing. But what we're seeing now is like even some very smart and, you know, smart people are like turning toward this as like a quick fix. It's almost like a techno fix. I call it like the drug fix of like trauma. It's like somehow if you just take this drug and you go on this trip, then you're going to be like magically healed, instead of being like, how did that get us our land back? You know, like how did that make you you know, how did that stop like all these things from happening? Sure, it might, you know, it might have like helped you realize as an individual this or that thing, but at what expense? You know, and at whose expense? Anyways, I've been in some conversations with people and about this. I've been thinking a lot about it, because there is this you know, with the kind of like fascist right wing in the United States, there's this kind of like QAnon stuff that's kind of moved in that realm. But I also see it seeping into the like left and progressive circles, because you go to other social movements in the global south and they're like singing, and like culture is very central to who they are. Like there's singing, there's dancing, there's, you know, even in the way we organize, we pray, we have ceremonies, there's songs that we sing. But you go to like a secular left event and it's like soulless. It's like people are like, Robert's Rules of Order is their religion or something. You know, it's hard to connect.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. And what I think is really fascinating, even about the Palestinian protests that I've been to, is that they hold like prayer. and like it's like this is how people are engaging, right? It's a politics of prayer and like connection to something like deeper. And I don't know, like anyway, I could ramble on and on about this, but it's something that I've been thinking about, because in this moment in time, it's like, it's not that I'm asking people to like, you have to have a religion, but this is a conversation that Cornell West and I were having, and it's like there has to be something more, right, than just Robert's Rules of Order, or whatever it is. And it can't just be a parasitic globbing on or extraction of like drugs, of alcohol, or whatever it is. There has to be something more substantive to people. And I want to do like a series of podcast episodes on this, because I just know a lot of people who are very critical of the commodification and the for-profit kind of pushes in indigenous healing circles and for indigenous medicines.
We absolutely should still have that series, Nick. Like, there's a lot of people and things and subjects that come to mind. Literally, Yoded. We could make it a revival of Yoded.
Can I just say this real quick? There are major efforts in like over 20 states to legalize peyote that are aligned with this like psychedelic liberalism or whatever it is that you're talking about, Nick. This is like this is a major issue. This is a major issue for Native people.
Yeah, I mean, it's related to so much too. Like, not only like the drugification of medicines, medicines going extinct, but also, just looking at how drug culture targets the most vulnerable, right? What have the impacts of drugs been in our communities historically? And now, like in a place like New Mexico, we're seeing big old raves, hippie raves coming, and they're trashing our sacred mountains, and tribes feel like they don't have a say, or like they're struggling to have a voice in all of this happening. We're seeing the encouragement of tribes getting involved in the drug industry via recreational cannabis. We're seeing like it's a lot, and it relates to a lot more than just like the drug industry itself and the drugification of medicines themselves. Like the domino effect is just going to be devastating, and it's going to be framed as progressive, and it's going to be appealing to people, maybe even appealing to tribes, right? Like it's very, it's very deeply disturbing. And I feel like that's a conversation that urgently needs to be had. And I think devoting a little mini series to that is going to be well worth it.
Heck yeah, coming soon.
Noted.
Also,
I'd watch it.
the SAG-AFTRA strike is over. And so we're gonna do more content on TV and film again with Red Power Hour. We're gonna do more reviews. Patrons have asked us to review Killers of the Flower Moon. I have to watch it first. No, it's all right. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Everyone,
Okay.
every Native review I've heard of it have like just hated that movie. So you're probably just gonna listen to us like rant about it. Do any of you want to be on this episode? Have any of you watched this movie? Justine, you did.
Yeah, I watched it with my partner. We both hated it, and we were in a room full of white people, and like at the ending scene, you just know it's the end scene, and and like before the credits even rolled, we just like stood up and walked out, like. And I asked him, I was like, how do you think all those white people felt like watching? Because we're like kind of in the front where the rail is. And I was like, how do you think all those white people felt like watching the only Native people in the room like stand up and walk out? Like they like until that moment, they were probably like so full of themselves for going to learn about history and like, oh, how tragic. Oh, but I'm educated now. Like, I don't know. That's what I imagined like people who watch that kind of shit are.
I'll be so real. I feel like a lot of white people, specifically white men, went to see that in hopes of seeing some sexual violence. I think they went for that.
No, that no, you're absolutely right, because the director Sorkesi or whoever, that's like his whole deal. I don't
That's what
know.
you gotta call him. Sorkesi. Just call him-
Sorkesi or who the fuck? I'm sorry, excuse me.
Let's call him
Who-
Meatball
who-
Martin.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's like one of the most famous directors of all time, and you're like, "What's that?" I
Yeah,
don't even.
It doesn't
know
matter.
your
Who the
name.
hell?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He's a boomer.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, cool, like we have these great native actors and actresses, and that's awesome, but like why is this the story that comes out, and why is this the thing that we, and I'll be honest, like this is my only critique of Res Dogs. After the suicide thing, I couldn't watch that show. Like it was hard for me to watch it because I was like, what's it's like it's all about that, and it's like I don't like, I was like, that's my life. I don't like, that's not something I'd like. I don't want to live, it's not entertaining for me. So like, why would I go see Flowers of the Killer Moon? Flowers of the Killer Moon? Is that Killers
I always
of the
get it
Flower
wrong.
Whatever. Why would I go see
Flowers
that
of the
when
Killer Moon.
when I know what's gonna happen? It's like I'm immersed in like genocide and death, like for everything, and then you have people come up to him like, hey, did you see that really effed up thing? Do you want to go? It's like, why would I want to go? Like, I don't want to go see that. Like, I'm just like chilling like a cucumber over here. Like, I don't want, like, I'll go see like some crappy film, but now also because of the letter, the pro-genocide letter that was issued by a lot of famous Hollywood types, there's a lot of things I'm not going to watch anymore. Like,
Yeah,
it's like
slim
done.
pickings,
I'm done.
slim
I
pickings out here.
can't do it.
Jordan
Yeah.
Peele canceled.
Canceled.
Taika.
Cancelled.
Canceled.
He should have been canceled a long time ago for reasons I won't even bring up.
But
Coming
yeah.
soon on Red Power Hour.
Canceled.
Yeah, so there was speaking of like good things, Dead Pioneers is a punk band, a native punk band.
It's a great name.
Justine posted them. Shout out to Dead Pioneers. If you don't know who they are, Google them, look them up. They're actually pretty cool. We should have them on the show. We should have them write a theme song. That would be sweet.
Should be called.
Yeah, I got him in our DMs. I
Sick.
told them I would follow up with them at the first half of December. Big fan right now. Jen put us onto that.
Yeah, some of that stuff can be a little corn town, but they kind of walk that fine line, and
In a really
Yeah.
awesome way. He's like, I'm not a good Indian because the only good Indian is a dead Indian, so I'm a bad Indian. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm a bad Indian too.
So I'll just be over here being a bad Indian.
the other good news, I guess, good things that I saw For the People, which is a play here. I forgot who she's Sichongu Lakota playwright from Rosebud, and it was good. And it was like one of those things, like my friend Rachel and Vinny, like they're like, hey, you should come see this. And I was like, oh man, it's gonna be like a trauma, like I can't do the trauma thing. And it was actually really good. It was like funny. It was like about Native humor, like Wes Studi was in it. Like it was hilarious. It was really good. And so that was something. I went to a play and it was good. It was funny because there's like a bunch of like old white people who you can tell like they pay thousands of dollars to have like, season passes to all these things. Didn't understand a damn thing about that joke or about the jokes, about the humor, about the inside, sorts of things. It was really funny. And it was actually about Minneapolis, and it was about the Native activist community in Minneapolis. So it was like really, if kind of thing. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I thought it's hilarious. And it's about pretendians. It's about like new age hippies. So good. Really hilarious. Highly recommend it.
What's it called?
For the People.
Cool. Is it like available to watch anywhere?
I think it's like one of those experimental plays where they wrote it with community.
Mhm.
And then they performed it, and it's like it just exists in that time, and then it's done. So sadly, I don't think so. But I can't remember. Actually, let me look it up. You guys talk. I'll look up the playwright's name.
If we're talking about theater, I kind of want to see Bear Grease. Not gonna lie.
Elena
Bear
had
Grylls.
Elena loved it.
Mhm.
You saw Bear Grease, you could do a review on the podcast.
I saw that there was going to be a show sometime somewhere up here. I don't know. We'll find it.
So
I,
it's by Ty Defoe and Larissa Fasthorse. That's what it is, and it's I think it's still playing at the no, it's not, but it was at the Guthrie here. Very cool.
I guess the kids are talking about Fry Bread Face and Me right now. Just came out on Netflix. Have any of you seen that? I watched it a couple of nights ago.
I haven't seen it.
Is it cute?
It's cute. It's cute.
Okay. Don't want
It's
to
like-
spoil it.
It's hokey. It's like, I don't know. It's good, but sometimes I just wish that like the production quality for native films was better. You get what I'm saying? Like sometimes like there's like an over hokiness to it, especially with culture stuff and like humor, that it's a little heavy-handed. It's a little heavy-handed. And I don't know. I wish people would just be
Noted.
like normal. Native actors would act normal, like normal native people when they are acting as native people. That's
Oh
instead of
man,
like
I'm s-
do you understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like the Smoke Signals kind of vibe a little bit.
Just
It
really
feels a little retro.
exaggerating the resiness or what?
Yeah, or like just exaggerating like being native, which is
Mm.
strange because they're like actually native, and so they don't need to do that. They're not like acting like they're native. Anyway, it's like I don't know, but it's cute.
natives playing
Yeah.
native.
Natives playing natives, natives playing natives.
I'm
That's what
guilty
I
of
see a
this.
lot. Oh, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't I haven't seen it. I haven't watched it yet, but no, I kind of heard like criticisms of what you're talking about, Melanie. Pretty much, I think people summed it up as like TikTok acting doesn't really like translate to like kind of like larger acting, you know, like some like it doesn't really like translate very well in all cases, and this might be one of them, you know, like that cultural like heavy-handed playing the native accent and stuff like that. So again, not my not my criticism, just what I've heard.
That's really bad if they're comparing it to how natives act on TikTok. That shit is so embarrassing. And like white people really follow them, like, oh, this guy, he has so much information to share. I'm like, fuck that guy. But okay.
Fun fact: Justine is in that movie. I'm just saying. Also, Justine. I mean, I may have called you out when I did my
I shit the
scathing
bed.
review of Dark
I
Winds
shit the
season
bed.
1.
Mhm,
But
I
Justine
shit the
is
bed.
also in Dark Winds.
What happened?
Just my bare presence in the media a bit.
Shame. No, I'm just kidding. No, Justine is like in one episode. There's one scene in Dark Winds. I forget. They're coming out of a teepee in like a peyote or something. And Justine's like the woman who opens the teepee flap, and is like carrying water, like some sort of fucking basket or something away. And I just knew. I was like, that's Justine.
Justine
Yeah.
loves Tony Hillerman.
Hey, I never said that.
What an opportunist. What an opportunist.
I don't know. It was a weird time in my life. I was like, I'm gonna go be a background actor. I'm in Fry Bread Face and Me. Yeah, I was with Melanie and Demetrius, and D was all, wait, which scene? And he like fast forwarded to the rodeo scene, and I'm
So
on
Ju-
it for like a solid,
Solid.
good, yeah, like solid few.
The camera like
seconds.
follows Justine in the background. Justine's walking off. And I didn't even recognize you with your cowgirl hair.
She's all yoded out.
Yeah, no, I was wearing fake turquoise jewelry, a cowboy hat that was too small for my head, and yeah, no regrets though.
There are like several Red Nation people who have been in a lot of these movies as
Dee's
extras.
gonna be in Res Ball.
Melissa
Oh, we'll
So,
see how that turns out. Yeah,
Melissa's in
Melissa's
everything.
been in like Longmire. Sam Gardape, like
Sam
OG
Burr.
Red Nation person from back in the day.
Oh yeah.
He's in stuff. Yeah.
Manhattan,
The Outer Limit. Is that a new movie? Outer Space, Outer Limit,
Outer
Outer
Range.
Range.
Outer Range.
We went to go
Yellowstone.
see if we could
It's
find
very
me in
silly.
it. They cut me out.
Man,
So these aren't podcast episode ideas. I just
I don't
let you
even
know.
want to. I don't even want to broach the subject about this Buffy St. Marie documentary.
I
we should-
always knew.
it. It was like, it was yeah. I don't even want to get into that, but
I
Then
just
why'd you bring it up?
because it was like it's been a while, and I just wanted to create a little bit of controversy,
well,
spice
it's
it
like
up a bit.
I just feel like it's just funny because like everything was going down with Palestine. It's like, oh, by the way, Buffy's fake, and then it just like floated off everyone's. I mean,
Yeah, I was like, irrelevant, but it's not.
but
Well,
also like I just have.
You know what actually did it for me? This is what did it for me. Trump's skincare routine is the exact same as Buffy
Exactly.
St. Marie.
I know.
Exactly. She looks
And,
fake.
like-
Like she acts fake. Like no real Indian acts like her. My
So
whole
I actually
family thought she was
Credit
fake.
Donald Trump for outing her because
No, I mean, I guess I never took the time to think about it, but I guess growing up, I would take a look at her and be like, that's not an auntie. Aunties don't dress like that.
I always thought she sang a little bit strange for me. Like it was like it's like you're kind of like laying a little too like Corntown, like like because if you look at like contemporaries of hers of that time period, like Floyd Westerman, Red Crow, they weren't singing Corntown, like this. You kind of go back and you're like, this kind of is like somebody sounds like a white person pretending to be native. It's like the Johnny Cash album where he like from a native son or whatever it is, where he like actually pretends to be native and it's like Corntown. It kind of like makes you rethink a whole lot of things, but at the same time, when you were like growing up, you were so like desperate and starving for like native, like everyone would be a native, like Ultimate Warrior. He's got to be native, the wrestler. I don't know if you guys know who that is. You don't even know who that is. You're all looking at me like,
No,
whatever.
I low key do, but I wasn't around.
Even Billy Jack. We all knew he was white, but
Yeah.
it didn't matter because he was freaking Billy Jack, right? And I feel like that was kind of like with Buffy St. Marie a little bit, like, and then after a while, it's just like, yeah, like, if you probably just like retired, like you might have like gotten away with it, but the fact that it's just like you just continually can like keep winning awards and like taking up space and getting cheesier, like adding more feathers, like it's like what I now realize Johnny Depp's inspiration for Captain Jack was actually Buffy St. Marie this entire time.
Fox.
Dead.
That's
Facts.
brutal.
You heard it here on the Red Nation podcast.
Breaking.
Breaking. Make a little headliner.
Okay, okay, all
Buffy
right.
St. Marie. Jack Sparrow inspired by Buffy St.
Buffy
Marie.
St. Marie.
I mean, it's also just like, I don't know. I think the Buffy thing like highlights something that I always say when we bring up pretenders, but I find it really, really hard to have sympathy for people who are shocked when someone who acts like a pretendant, who acts a fool, is outed as a pretendant. I'm like, I just, if it's someone who's going to get roasted on by my family, if it's somebody that's going to get called corny by the people in my community, it's very obvious. It's very obvious.
Yeah. Talk about like acting native, like exaggerating. That's I kind of always thought that about Buffy St. Marie. I was never really a fan.
People who are
But
like
really-
identity obsessed.
Just hokey. It's just real. It's just hokey. I always thought it was hokey. TBH.
I think the biggest thing in Canada was the fact that she's actually an American white woman.
They care about her there.
She like won awards that were specifically for Canadians, not just like
Ew.
native Canadians. And the fact that she's just like
Not
She
even
was like-
Canadian.
Yeah, I think that's also what upset a lot of people. Whatever, doesn't matter to me. I gotta get going, comrades. This has been a fun 4-year birthday party. I feel like we should have like cake or something,
I wish we could eat together.
or like pizza, some like green chili pizza. I miss it.
How
Anyone
about we
goes-
all DoorDash something at the same time?
And then we eat it on screen. This is
For
now a
Kylie-
mukbang channel.
Kylie and Kai can't DoorDash. It's like
I know.
they have mutton dash down there.
It comes in on sheep.
Yeah.
I have like a 4 candle that I can light, but I don't have anything to put it on.
Let me see.
4. You just got around a 4 candle.
No, it's for my 42nd birthday. That just happened.
Oh
I
yeah!
got
Happy
4 to
birthday,
2,
Mel!
but now we got
Oh
the
my
4.
god! Happy
Woo!
birthday!
Happy birthday, Mel!
But I can
Wait.
light the 4 candle for these purposes. I can repurpose the candle, the 4 of the 42. I just don't have nothing to put it on. That's the problem.
Your birthday was last week, huh? Was it the 28th? 29th.
26.
Hell yeah. Happy belated, Mel. It's Sagittarius season. For
Sure
those of you
is.
who don't know, half of the Red Nation is straight Sagittarius. Did you know that Nick has a Sagittarius stellium? That means most of the placements in his chart are Sagittarius. Get a load of
stellium?
that, people. You do with that
Stellium?
information what you will.
Almost everything in Nick's chart is a Sag and of Sag energy. He has a Sagittarius Mars, Sagittarius, I think V. No.
Leave,
No,
leave some
sorry.
comments. What do you guys make of that? What do you guys make of Nick's chart?
I don't.
What do you think of that, guys?
No one knows what you're talking about
I have
except
no
for
idea.
the
what you're talking about either.
Here, we're gonna post his chart on the show. No,
Roast Nick's chart.
Yeah, they only see like the top part of me. The bottom part of me is actually horse. Like so
Sick.
He's just an actual centaur. Like.
okay, y'all.
Someone should draw that.
Okay.
okay. All right. Well,
All right.
this is a good stopping place. We're about an hour 42 right now. Thank you so much for supporting the Red Nation podcast. Again, you can support us on mainly through our Patreon. If you go to the Red Media Patreon, home of the Red Nation podcast, you'll find us there. You can subscribe for as low as $2 a month, and on there, and there are other tiers too. You don't have to stop at $2. We have a tier that's high as $10,000 a month.
$10,000.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
And you can
Yeah.
you can really sustain our
Scorsese.
organization, our work.
Yeah.
Get
Martin
on
the-
there.
Martin the Meatball, also known as Martin Scorsese.
Also known as Sorcasi.
Sorcasi.
Money.
I'm
Reparations for that.
still
trash-ass
unclear on
movie.
what his last name is.
It's Scorsese,
Oh,
It doesn't matter.
but it doesn't matter.
Scor-
Get it wrong and do it every time.
Scorglazzi.
Scorglazzi.
Spangle.
Seriously though, but we need to build out the press too, and we need coins to do that. So
We need to purchase a continuous supply of books for Kylie and Freedom to Read. And again, it's not just the Red Nation podcast you're sponsoring. So please, that's the best place. If not, you can also find us on PayPal. We have links across all of our bios on all of our websites for the Red Nation and Red Media. And we did get a couple new patrons during this time. So
Woo!
heck
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you.
Pretty cool.
Please
got
look forward to
Josh, Alexander Marin, Gustavo Vargas.
shout out. Hell yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I just saw that. Thanks for signing up.
Boys.
Yep. I'm looking forward to how 2024 is going to go. Looking forward to further coverage and further media solidarity with our relatives in Palestine as well. So
Mhm.
thank you all so much for showing up. Thank you, comrades, for joining. I think that's it.
Scoot in.
Woo.
Go.
Bye.
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 Bye.